with over 2 decades of experience working with early stage and high growth organizations. As the founder and CEO of Pro Growth People Solutions, Saurabh Nigam specializes in designing people practices that directly supports business growth. He has advised startups, mid-sized firms, and large organizations including Omidyar Network, Snapdeal, and the Aditya Birla Group. Recognized as a LinkedIn Top Voice 2024 and named among the top 25 future HR leaders of the country by People Matters and DDI International. He is known for aligning HR strategy and business outcomes. He's the author of People Powered Startups, Building a Culture of Collaborations, Innovation and High Performance, published by Penguin Random House. The book offers a practical, India specific roadmap for founders navigating people and culture challenges in fast growing startup. Sir, I welcome you on this dais. Joining him in the conversation is Satish Jha, a social entrepreneur, early stage investor, and institution builder with a distinguished career across journalism, public policy, technology, and social innovation. Satish Jha began his public journey working with Jayaprakash Narayan and went on to play a seminal role in Hindi journalism as a founding editor of Jansatta. He later served as editor of Dinaman and one of the most respected news magazine of its time. He has co-founded and nurtured numerous initiatives at the intersection of technology and social impact, including PUCL Bulletin, Digital Partners, Desi Par, and several pioneering digital and rural enterprise. In collaboration with Nicholas Negroponte, he led the one laptop per child initiative in India, influencing the adoption of screen-based learning in government schools across several states. An early stage investor and mentor to over 40 startups, he has supported founders through governance, strategy, and capital raising and scale. His academic training spans international relations, political economy, and technology management from institutions including the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and the Kennedy School of Government. I humbly request you, Satish sir, please come up on the stage with a big round of applause for both our speaker and moderator. The discussion as we explore what truly enables startups to grow, scale, and sustain themselves beyond the early stages. I request to kindly join us on the dais and begin the session.
Thank you very much. And I wish everyone spoke like you, with clarity, every word coming out as crystal clear as could get. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. And I got to know Saurabh just a few days ago, both in name and deed. And, and it made me think because what he's doing is something we all needed. And we all need it every time we began a company. And then I began thinking about what is it that we need to do in the light of very powerful phrases he has used and the kind of playbook he has given us. And I thought this is a context also to create why some startups succeed and some struggle. I think none fails really in the larger context. They might fail in some microcosm. In larger context, everything that is created creates, it becomes a manure to the next generation in some ways. So let's look at the landscape we have. I think India today has about almost a couple of 100,000 startups. Every year we add about, say, 40, 45, 50,000 startups now. We are raising something in terms of a few $1 billion in um, startup funding. Now, see that where did the word startup come from? It's nothing to do with us. It basically comes from a different culture, where the meaning of a startup used to be to start something new, which will create something which doesn't exist at all till date. So when startups are considered in the US system, they create technologies which don't exist. If you're going to create a business, it's not really seen in the same way as a startup. But there is a process. It's either technology or process. So something which uses process or technology to create something new, that is considered a startup. But otherwise, you're a businessman. You want to open a tea shop or you want to take a franchise, not a start. That's not a startup. If you take a franchise, if you open a shop which has been already created earlier, you replicate something, that's not a startup. Now, that's how America creates technology. Today, almost 95% of all technologies created are created in a place called America. Why is it that Europe has fallen behind? I can get to that point later on. But right now we are going to confine to the fact that people who get into this, how do they handle it? People, and therefore power, and therefore HR, and so on and so forth. I must say that as long as I worked for someone, I didn't fail. My performance post facto, I'm not judging performance at the beginning, was better than expected. Sometimes by a larger, you can say, number than expected humanly or imaginable at one point in time. When I became an entrepreneur myself, nothing was going right. So what happened? Nothing was going right. Yes, I was able to raise money. I was able to even create a product. I was able to find a first customer. But the people we had in India, they were not very different. In America, I could easily find one. For instance, I became chairman of a company called Emotion Mining. Within 72 hours, I had 3 people with 20, 25 years experience, one Harvard MBA, one Babson MBA, one Duke MBA. They were VPs, senior VPs earning $250,000, $300,000. They joined me in less than 72 hours with zero money, only on equity. And they actually joined within 72 hours. And people were surprised, how did I do that? I could do that in America. But India, I haven't had luck. Even though I paid the market salaries, I hired somebody from a very large company. I paid him in 8 figures. I paid people in very high 7 figures. But not one person I hired of the 276 or 7 people I've hired in the past 6 years, not one person even gave me 1% of what they promised they will give me. Forget about what I expected. Even what they promised they will do, not 1% was delivered. Now there's something, the magic that he has, which I don't have. So that's why it's a good point for me to start asking him questions, so we all begin to learn something. Okay, so in the light of that, I'll ask him to first give a sense of what his sense of his book is, so we can begin to get a perspective, and then we go to the next questions.
Thank you, sir, and very good afternoon and namaste to all of you. And it's an absolute honor to be sitting here. This is my home state. I belong to a place called Jabalpur, and it also gives me a huge amount of honor to be doing this session alongside sir. My family members are here as well. So before I even talk about books, sir, let me just give you a little bit of my background. I've been an HR professional for about 20 years now. I've been an engineer before that. I've done coding for a few years, so understand technology fairly well. You talked about. Out of those 20 years of being an HR professional, about 17 years has been the word which you use, startups, and in India, right? I've worked with companies like Omedia Network, which is an impact investment firm. I helped companies which were funded by Omedia Network, which were trying to create impact on the ground in India. Worked with founders and entrepreneurs, helping them figure out their people practices, HR practices. I've headed HR for Snapdeal, which is one of the pioneers of e-commerce in the country. And during these years, one thing which really stood out for me was that as Sir you rightly said, there definitely is something which we can call it as a secret sauce, which is required for companies which are starting off for them to succeed, right? And what that secret sauce is something which is what I've tried to capture in this book. But before even go there, and Satish sir talked about startup. What really is a startup? And I use two words which sound very simplistic, but I truly stand by that when I look at a startup. Startup is nothing but an experiment, right? When you're starting off an organization, when you're trying to build something, you're really experimenting because you really don't know whether it's going to land, right? Whether it's going to succeed or not. So you're really experimenting as a founder, as an entrepreneur. You're trying to figure out whether that product, technology product, or a service which you feel really strongly about as a founder is going to succeed in the market or not. So it's an experiment, right? The thing is that because it's an experiment, it is temporary, right? An experiment has ultimately an end date, right? So you think about it as an entrepreneur, when you take that call of starting something new, which is in your mind, you're very passionate about, but it is temporary and it is an experiment. You don't know it's going to succeed or not, right? It is important to keep the fact in mind that, okay, what will lead this experiment to succeed? That's extremely important, right? What is that catalyst which will ensure that the experiment I'm doing, which is nothing but building my organization, is going to succeed or not? That's what the secret sauce is all about. Now, you talked about some numbers, sir, but in India, this experiment called the startup ecosystem for last 10, about 15 years has been booming. This is a hotbed of startups right now. And I'm not going to go into that how many of those are really innovative and new products, but all said and done, it's a hotbed of innovation, a hotbed of startups in the country at this point of time, with billions of dollars of funding coming through, right? Yet the fact is that more than 90% of the startups fail, right? So why do they fail? Now, is it because the funding isn't there? In India, at least, that's not the issue, right? Yeah, there are cycles which come through, funding goes up, funding comes down, but at least for the last few years, almost a decade, funding is not an issue, right? If you have the right product or the idea, people are there to back you up, right? So is it because of technology? It's the same technology which is being used across the world, right? So it cannot be technology, right? So why do startups fail? And my hypothesis is really the fact that startups fail because they don't get their people strategy and people practices right? And I'll deal about that. And this book is all about that, if you are taking that step towards starting an experiment, starting a temporary organization, right? The secret sauce really is you need to get your people practices right for it to sustain, for it to succeed. And so for that, so that it doesn't fall into that 90% bracket of failing. That's the hypothesis with which I start this book. This is the hypothesis with which I've written this book. As I said, I've been in this ecosystem for almost 2 decades now, have seen various organizations rise and fail and succeed. And it's given me a bird's eye view from very close quarters that what that secret sauce is, which will make sure that your people practices are up to the mark and gives you a much better probability of that experiment of yours succeeding. That's what this book is all about. That's the premise of the book. And by the end of the session, I hope we were able to put this together across to all of you that, what are those secret sauces? What are some of the elements of that secret sauce which enables an organization to succeed? I'll give 3 or 4 nuggets to start off with, and then we can go deeper if you permit, sir. So let's think about this, right? So when as a founder, as an entrepreneur, or as an individual, you have this idea, this thought, that, okay, I'm going to build a product, I'm going to build a service, and I'm going to take it to the market. You're absolutely passionate about it, right? That's the seed. That's the start of your entrepreneurial journey, right? And a lot of people talk about, and so you mentioned as well, you need people, right? Because the fact that you're so passionate about a product or an idea, you can't do it all by yourself. You need people, you need team to start building things around that product or that idea, right? That's a given, right? My hypothesis is that which is the single biggest or the most important person or the role which you need to hire when you start off, right? And if you read about it, a lot of people talk about, and I'm sure you would have faced this as well. If you're a technology company, you'll say, I need head of technology, right? Ultimately, at some point, you'll say head of sales. My hypothesis, and that's what I start my book with, is that one of the most critical roles or the important individuals you need in your organization when you're starting off, whether that role is played by you or someone else, is you need to be a talent architect. And what I mean by that is you need to figure out that this idea which you have, which you're so passionate about it, what kind of people and what are the different kind of roles which you would need in your organization, and where are you going to get that from? You need to have that vision and that clarity in your mind. Now, whether you do it yourself or you get someone to do it, and again, I'm not trying to say that you need to hire an HR person, me being an HR professional, but you need to hire a talent architect if you can't play that role yourself. And talent architect, I don't mean by that you need to have someone who can hire for you. That's very transactional. Somebody who can tell you that if you want X, Y, Z in your organization, where to look for, what to look for, how to evaluate, and what would it take for that person to succeed, that's talent architecture for me. And that to me is the starting point for any organization which is, right? So when you're looking to build that organization, that role needs to be filled out for you. That's the starting point. Second part is, when you're working alone or when you're playing a game which is an individual sport, a tennis or badminton, right? You can decide when you want to play, how to play. Similarly, when you're working all by yourself, you can decide when to work, how to work, how many hours to work. It's up to you, right? The moment you decide and you get the second person into the organization, the dynamics changes. It's no longer you deciding that how you're going to work, right? You need to collectively figure out how you're going to work together, right? You're going to collectively need to figure out what are going to be my ways of working together as a team, right? A football team made up of 11 players cannot expect to win if each of those 11 players say, I'll play the way I want to play. It will lose, right? Same holds true for any organization. The moment you start putting people together as an entrepreneur, the second factor is what people talk about culture, I say ways of working. You need to be very deliberate about how are we going to work together, right? A lot of times I see and I've seen organizations fail where they're able to hire top talent, the right talent they want, but they fail to figure out how we're going to work together, right? And if you're not going to figure out how you're going to work together, what's okay, what's not okay while working together, it's going to lead to failures only. So that's the second premise I want to talk about. I've talked about in my book. And the third one is around you've got the people in, you've got figured out your ways of working. You need to define what success means for you, right? And what I mean by that is there's a very beautiful video by Stephen Covey where he talks what he shows is there are a group of kids put into a football field, given a football, but not told that they have to score in which goalpost. What happens? All of them are kicking the ball. Ball is traveling all over the field, but they have no idea how they're going to win against the opposing team, right? Same holds for any organization as well, right? You've put the team together now, right? You've defined how we're going to play, which is kicking the ball. But unless you define that what success or what winning means, how is that team going to win? And that's where the entire performance bit comes in. It saddens me when people think about performance as just about increments and bonuses and whatnot. That's just an outcome. Performance really is how deliberate you are about defining what success means for this team and how we're going to succeed, right? How we're going to get there. And defining that becomes the third. So those are the three aspects I would like to touch upon. There are a lot of other pieces I've talked about in the book, but these are three pieces which are very strong close to my heart, which is you need to hire a talent architect if you're not playing that role yourself, right? You need to be very deliberate about defining the culture or the ways of working of your team along with you. And you need to be very, very strongly committed to defining the success and what that success means for that team which you're putting together.
No, thank you. There's no disagreement that people create organizations. They make organizations. They create the architecture of success. And depends on the leadership you have. But good thing here is, while I succeeded in large corporate structure, I miserably failed in my own ventures, and I always succeeded in somebody else's ventures. Yep. Now, in people, I thought I was able to, manage good people, and I hired some of the recommended HR people, paid them all the salaries they wanted, and not one of them was able to do anything worth what they promised as such. So I'm going back to this. Mm-hmm. So there is a stage when what you're saying begins to succeed. Mm-hmm. There's a stage before that. That's when the challenge arises. Mm-hmm. So when you start a startup, until the time it becomes cash flow positive on a sustained basis, it's a different startup. If you take either it's cash flow positive because of excess investment, which is not really cash flow positive, but fund positive, and or because it succeeded as a business and now it's got traction. Then on everything you're saying you're right. But now take your experience and the people or startups which actually are just getting born, how should they handle that?
Right. Okay. So the great question, right? Ultimately, you need to pay to people for them to work with you, right? And if pay is the only thing in which you believe is going to get people to commit to your vision, right, or your experiment which is growing up, then that's not sustainable. At least in the initial period, right? Because you're not going to have tons of money with you, right? And therefore, what will work is, are you able to find people who are as excited about that experiment or that idea which you have in your mind as out there, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that your first set of 5-10 people which you're going to hire and which you're going to come on board need to index more heavily on your passion and your vision rather than the deep pockets which you may or may not have, because that's what they are the ones who are going to create that architecture for the organization. Now, that's where it becomes difficult. That how do you even find that, right? And honestly speaking, there is no magic mantra beyond the fact that you need to be out there and meeting people and figuring things out to see how you can find that people. And therefore, if you see, more often than not, co-founders are classmates or friends or in sometimes family members as well, because I trust. Number one is trust, right? I mean, your first set of people who come and join, you need to have that trust on you that, okay, what you're thinking, your vision, yeah, absolutely. I believe in that, right? So you need to start with your inner circle. It's not really by chance that your initial set of teams in pretty much most of the startups comes from your inner circle, right?
I would say one thing that I'm trying to really share with you the experiences that I've had in my own startups. 276 people hired. Everybody came because they wanted to work with me.
Got it.
So in other words, there was attraction. They believed what I said, but they did not have the skills to either do it, or they were not able to learn how to do it, or they could not unlearn what they knew and relearn something new. That's where I needed a good HR person. I tried hiring, and 3, 4, 5 people, and I thought they were passionate, but I didn't succeed. Tell me, why did I fail?
Awesome. 276 people, if they did not succeed, then I would say we didn't hire the right people. We didn't. They might have been passionate, but there's definitely, now why we didn't hire the right people, I'm not saying that the issue was with people. I'm saying we need to look within ourselves that did we even define what kind of people we wanted? What did we want that individual to do? Did we define what my org design is? Did we figure out that, in my technology team, in my sales team, what are the hierarchy do we need? What kind of skill set I need? That's part one. Second, beyond the definition, did we put on enough checks and balances and evaluation mechanism to make sure, to give us the confidence that we are filtered out the right set of people and how confident we were about it, right? You're taking those.
I said no. Somebody should keep noting down what you're saying.
Okay. And third, I touched upon that, right? Getting the team and assuming all of that was done. Assuming all of that was done, you defined your roles, you had all your checks and balances and filters in place, and you got the team in place. The point which I made, the 2 points which I made about is, did we deliberately define that how these 250 or 270 odd people are going to work together? What is that ways of working? What is our culture? And did we deliberate about it? I feel very strongly about when people talk about culture as, ping pong tables and free lunches and swanky offices. That's not culture, right? To me, the 2 fundamental aspects of culture in any organization is trust and transparency. And I'll just deal on that. If I do not trust my manager, right, then nothing else matters to me, right? If I come from a Fauji background, father served the Indian Army for 38 years, and I do believe that that's almost an epitome, that organization is epitome of trust and transparency, because for a soldier to trust, to go and be ready to be on the front and knowing fully well that he may not come back, it comes from deep trust on your supervisor, your boss. So I do fundamentally believe that organizations fail when they start looking at culture as a swanky word which needs to just get copied from likes of Googles and the Microsofts of the world, and they fail to understand that, the Google succeeded not because of swanky Office. Google succeeded because of those little tenets which they built in their ways of working, which was around trust, transparency, and those are some of the examples I've used in my book as well, or Netflix for that matter. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you may have put the team together with the right design and the right evaluation parameter. Did we have the right environment, the culture, ways of working for that team to succeed? Third one. And the fourth and the final point, again, which I did touch upon, is that did we make it very clear to that team that what success means for the organization and therefore for the team? And I'm going to go back to soccer as an example. It starts with those 11 players knowing fully well that they need to score more goals than the opposing team. It's a given. It's simple, right? A soccer team will win if they score more goals than the opposing team. But not everybody in that 11-member team is going to score goals, right? Only the strikers will score goals. But you still need midfielders, you still need defenders, you still need goalkeepers, right? And each one of them need to know that role they are playing in order to ensure that the team is scoring more goals than the other. And that needs to get translated back into, are we translating that language back into the organization? Because a lot of times organizations fail because that clarity is in there.
10 organizations which I helped as mentor, chairman, CEO in the US, startups. They were real startups in the sense that they lacked everything. They lacked, they had created a product, they lacked a buyer. They needed investment, they lacked money. They didn't have a good team. I succeeded each time, every time. How I said 60 days, 90 days, 180 days, I never failed. When I tried the same thing here, I didn't succeed. Now that's why I need to ask him, what is it? And I'll say my sense was this, the culture. And I hired people from Ahmedabad. I was told he was president of a large organization. Was it just the space I chose, education, edtech? No company succeeded. Not one company at tech has succeeded so far in 30 years. They have taken money from investors. None has created a balance sheet, an annual report, which will say the company succeeded as a profitable company based on the business it does. You take 500 crore rupees from an investor and you spend 200 crore rupees to put a revenue of 1 crore rupees. One company, Byju's, $22 billion, could not even get 1,000 crore revenue in a year towards the end of it. So something about the sector also has to be seen. Yeah. Probably education was not the right sector. Maybe this has something to do with sector as well and people. So my question to you will be, in that situation, education requires startups. Startup means someone who is able to understand what is the future technology and or what needed and creates that or adapts that and basically is able to take it to spread around and create a business around that. How would you, with your experience, recommend what education sector, all the failed biggies they should have done?
Okay, wow. I think there was a reason why you didn't tell me that what were you going to ask me, but this is this is something which at Omedia we backed a lot of edtech startups. Vedantu was one of our biggest investments. I fundamentally don't think that edtech is the wrong business. I mean, you yourself said that right now, right? What we saw in last couple of years, and because I worked very closely with Vedantus and English helpers and aspiring minds of the world, is the fact that the COVID spoiled us in edtech, right? And again, I'm using examples of companies I have worked with and then, a bit of research around that. When you see a environmental change, which COVID was, and hopefully we don't ever see that kind of a change again in our lifetime at least, and use that environmental change and index your entire business strategy and growth plans based on that. Nothing wrong about it because businesses need to react to environment. But what you don't understand or do is that, visualize that it's momentary. It will change, right? And you don't prepare for that. That's where it starts failing, right? So why the Byju's or the Vedantus, and again, I'm not going to go to the dark secrets of Byju's, but why some of these edtechs failed to capitalize on the momentum which they built during COVID when everybody was indoors and therefore all you had to do or all you could do was only study online, is the fact that they failed to anticipate that COVID will end, right? It is not going to be there because if COVID did not end, then forget about edtech. None of us would be sitting here, right? So COVID was supposed to end. It would have ended. What we did not within EdTech as an ecosystem did not do well enough, and now we're trying to figure that piece out, is figure out that what will happen, what will that world look beyond COVID, and how will we react to that, and how will we adapt to that.
I don't want to make it a tech story, but I don't think Vedantu and some of these coaching and or exam-oriented
Right.
bodies they are edtech.
Right.
Edtech is about either K-12 or what supports college and learning. So that's another story. But let me ask you, your examples come from America. Lots of your examples come from America. Zappos,
Yeah.
Netflix, and
Yeah.
whatever, etc. You talk about. I don't even, I've known these people who created them.
Right.
When I look at your examples, compared to that in India, I don't think there are startups anymore. The culture of a startup can be retained without being a startup. That's another story. But startup is someone who still is struggling, hasn't found three things: the great team, the great buyers, sustainable buyers, or great investors. Any of these things or combination, whichever way it happens. Once they have aligned all these and balanced, they've gone to the next stage. They're maturing. A startup is like a child from 0 to 5, or maybe 0 to 12, or 19. I think a startup is 0 to 21. At 21, you become someone, you can sustain yourself, or something like that. So my point is, how do you see the difference between the startups you worked with here? Because, of course, Pierre Omidyar is, he's not an Indian, so he knows how to handle what he did. Right. And some of the companies you worked with, they created a model based on a global model. Right. How do you see the difference between what we see from people management point of view, talent management, us and them?
A great question, actually. Some of the learnings I've had over there, when you do this comparison, examples like Zappos or Netflix, I think 2-3 stark differences, and I think we're still learning that, and we've come a long way around it. One of the biggest mistakes I personally feel I made as an HR professional at Snapdeal was, and I say this to all the entrepreneurs I work with, is the mistake we used to make where you start believing that a growth in business metric is linearly correlated to growth in your team or team size, right? What I'm trying to say here is that in 2014, when Snapdeal got that massive almost $1 billion funding from SoftBank, and obviously with that came a very massively changed business plan. The first thing we all did was, hey, we were 600 people, we need to get more people. And the growth plan was about 10x. And yeah, within 1 year, we were about 8,000 member organization, right? And what that fundamentally is you're doing by doing that is you're questioning or you're negating the fact that people can or will become more productive as they go along the journey, right? They will learn more, they will get more skilled. And that's what happened. And again, I'm going to use Snapdeal as an example because I worked very in close quarters there. Within a year and a half, we actually had to scale down that organization from 8,000 to 1,000 people without much of an impact on the top line. Whatever business we were doing, we were still doing the same business. So point I'm trying to make is that learning is still evolving, that what is the science behind growing your team in order to achieve your growth as a business, and it is invariably never linearly correlated, right? I mean, a massive example is WhatsApp. It was a 50-member organization when it got acquired for $1 billion. And I think in the Indian startup ecosystem, that is a learning which we're still having, which we're still figuring things out, that, okay, what is the science to build out the organization? That's number one. Number two, I do believe that, again, it could be exuberance of youth, because most of our startup founders are still in their late 20s or early 30s, where you start with an idea, which is great, but you need to adapt and you need to pivot. I don't see a lot of entrepreneurs are able to pivot soon enough to be able to remain ahead of the curve. Again, Netflix is a beautiful example. I mean, it was a DVD rentals company when they started off, right? They pivoted. So how many of us are willing to pivot as entrepreneurs is the second piece. So those are the two pieces which I do believe are areas which we need to learn quickly enough to be able to sustain our ecosystem.
If you're young and sitting here, each one of you will have to go through phase, whatever he's talking about. You learn from him, you will manage your life and career way better than you would do without it. Now, I'll give you an example. When I ran one laptop per child, I'll tell you, people came from University of Chicago, came from Cambridge. One boy from Cambridge, he had a job at HSBC at £70,000 at that time. after his graduation. And he came to work with us without salary and worked with us for 9 months. And then he went back and took the job. IITs, IIMs, foreign universities, they would come, and I had a team of some almost 50 people, and they wouldn't take salary. And they still came and worked, and they were some of the brightest, best and brightest. And they're doing very, very well because they leveraged that to become smarter people, become people who had different language, different way of handling it. Now, that also happened. So on the one hand, I had those challenges. On the other hand, in something where money was not even a question, we are able to. Is it that you create an idea that catches an imagination? Or is it that the profitability of where it is going, what is it that attracts good people to organizations?
Initially, it has to be the idea. And I dare say your reputation, right? I mean, if today, and again, I'm going to use Kunal Behl just as an example, or Mark Zuckerberg for that matter, announces that, we're going to start and some crazy idea. You may not believe on that idea, but you still would invariably end up believing in that man, right? Because he's done that, right? And he's built something like a Facebook or a Meta for that matter, right? So either one of the two has to happen, which is like an absolutely crazy idea, which I truly feel strongly about. Either because it has potential to make big money or because it has got potential to make big impact. Now that's something which depends on what your wiring is all about. Or it is the man. It is the path or the reputation which that guy carries. It has to be one of the two which will attract your first set of people. Now there's no other reason why people will come and join you.
I'll tell you, when Mark Zuckerberg came to join me, I didn't hire him.
You didn't?
So that tells you about my talent. But nonetheless, then he asked me $50,000, which I didn't give him. I said, you're a smart guy, you don't need my money.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd invested, right? This is not just it. Same thing happened to Kalashnikov. So 2 investment choices I had facing me, I did not make for these 2. In other words, nobody is too smart for everything,
Yeah.
number 1. Number 2, I think, I don't know what the time is. I have 5 questions for him, but I'm told I don't have all the time on the planet. So any questions, please, any questions you have, just write down your questions and I'll be ready for that. We'll come to that. Let me ask you, if you had to tell people, for young people,
Right.
those who are going to be the real startup people, those who have no money, and now they have to find people, what should they do?
This is based on the assumption that you already have the idea or the thought what you want to build. That's a given, right? The first thing you need to do is start talking about it. Start being out there talking about it. Now, whether you do it in forums, in your networks, on social media, what you need to start talking about it, because of that very thing which you said, sir, that you need to build your first team, and that you don't have deep pockets. So you need to figure out people who would believe, or who the idea which you have in your mind will resonate with someone, right? And for that resonation to happen, people need to know about it, right? So for me, the starting point has to be, if you have an idea, start talking about it, right? And the easiest thing to do is start talking about it in your inner circle, right? Your friends and family. And so to me, that's the starting point. The other one I would say is that have the instinct, have the gut and the instinct to go for it, right? Having worked with almost 70 odd entrepreneurs in the country, one thing which is common across all of them is that they are so bloody confident about what they're trying to build. And I don't think confidence can be replaced, and you need to have that almost crazy confidence to say, I'm not going to pick up a job, I'm going to build something, right? My mom would say, "Jhak sawar honi chahiye," like that's what she says, right? So that madness is required for you to take that first step forward. It is scary. It can frighten you, but there is no other way, right? I mean, if you want to run a marathon, you need to cross the start line, right? Start talking about what you have in your mind and take that first step is what I would say, and then things will fall around.
And I would like to say that of the 276 I hired, a dozen finally became startup owners. And they raised the money, and then they came back in touch with me. They learned so much. So there was something missing. It takes time for them to get ready for the role.
That's true.
That's what sometimes companies do not have the patience or wherewithal or finances to sustain them for the time being when they can learn and go to the next stage. So that happens too. So, I mean, okay, without knowing much, and whatever you have said, I've hired IM guys, I've hired IT guys, I've hired people with 20 years experience, recommendations, all. What could I have done better without you knowing much, because you see, a doctor doesn't have to know everything, right? Go to the doctor, sees us, and gives. Now you are the doctor.
What could you have done different to have higher degree of success with the people you ended up hiring? So I may end up assuming things, but then I'm going to still say that in India we have a problem of going after pedigree, right? And I mean, if my wife hears that, she's going to say, because you have a pedigree, you can say that. But I fundamentally disagree with the fact that, if you have a tag, you might be good at it, or you will be good at the job. I do not agree with that, right? And I also, and this comes from not just being a student of human behavior. I almost feel that, you need to hire for fire, right? You need to hire for that, the fire in the belly. And there is no formula to evaluate that, right? I mean, you can evaluate for skills. You can evaluate me for how good or bad an HR professional I am. But do I have the fire in the belly to hit the ball out of the park? There is no science to that, right? And I always say this, that people feel that hiring is pretty easy. Just go out, ask questions, and hire someone. No, as an HR professional, I do believe that's the toughest job out there, right? Because when I'm asking questions, I'm only asking skills, right? But how do I figure that piece out? That does this person have the wherewithal to hit the ball out of the park along with me? Again, I don't know whether you did that piece right or not, because invariably when people tell me that, yeah, I ended up hiring someone wrong, that person knows the sales job, the person knows technology, came from IIT Delhi, definitely knows engineering, but fir bhi nahi chala, right? वो नहीं चला invariably is because that person did not have the wiring which you needed for him to succeed with him or her to succeed in your ecosystem.
Who has questions? Anyone? If you have questions, I'll probably. Any hands? I think you all. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You have a mic behind you.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So my question is that you mentioned about ideas that you truly strongly feel about it. You mentioned that. So, and people-centric startups. So what if I have a startup with the right people, but the idea that I came up with, it's by the time I get to that, to the working of that startup, the idea has gone idle or stale. So, because today everything, every trends that we talk about, they change very rapidly.
Correct.
So, what about it? How do we create the balance between the right people? Maybe it took me a lot of time to find the right people. By that time, the idea has gone stale.
Yeah.
So, how do we find the balance between them?
No, that's a great question, and that's what I just mentioned, that as an entrepreneur you have a choice, that when and almost a responsibility, if I may say that, to be ahead of before your idea going stale or getting copied. That what do you do next, right? I gave an example of Netflix. It started as a DVD rental company, right, and they're doing what they're doing now, right? So. If you believe or if you see that what you started off with does not have the potential or has reached its max potential, you have a choice, right? Either you continue with whatever potential you have reached, right? And if that potential is zilch, then you have another choice, which is to shut it down, which 90% of the startups fail. Or if you still have that madness, figure out what next. How do you take it from there, right? There is no other way. These are the three options which you have actually.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, but I'll also tell you, the man, Divya, who hired Zuckerberg, he also ruled the day that he hired him.
Oh, okay.
And finally, because of that, he made $50 million in the end by litigation. That's
Right.
it. Having said that,
Sir has
yes, yes, sir.
So,
No.
so you have mic.
Yeah, you have great voice.
So my question, Saurabh and Raghav Chandra,
Yes, sir. I
is,
heard you, sir.
what is it that we as a startup ecosystem and the government are doing for our startups in terms of creating the right atmospherics for R&D, innovation, motivation, support? Do you think there's something lacking, or you think that's an area where we, because we today pride ourselves in the fact that after perhaps the US and China, we are
Yeah, the one.
one of the top startup countries in the world.
Right, sir.
Are we doing enough? I'm asking that academically, not just from the point of view of entrepreneurs,
Right.
but
Sure.
If I had seen you earlier, I would have pivoted in that direction, but great.
So, sir, I had a good fortune of working with the Startup India mission as well for almost 8 months last year. I mean, there's so much being done, right? From a policy framework, from a funding perspective, from a regulatory perspective. One area which I truly believe that we can do a lot more is revisiting our entire education system itself, right? I still do not believe that we are creating people who can think like, sir, you started and it hit really hard when you said that the innovation is still happening out there in the US and the Europe. It's not happening here, and I don't disagree with that, by the way, right? So I do not think we are creating enough mechanisms in our education system, right from K-12 right up to graduation and research-based studies. To drive innovation-based entrepreneurship, right? And I think that's an area which we really need to revisit and relook. I have gone through NEP multiple times, and I do believe that that's a great shift, but I don't think that's enough. National education policies is a good step in that direction, but I think there's a lot more needs to be done from an education perspective. And because you asked from a government perspective, and I think government has a big role to play there in that sense. Yeah. You're welcome.
And we can have a conversation on that later, not here. But I've been told to conclude it. If no one questions are there, then I'd like to say one thing. If you have the kind of experience he has, and it's an amazing experience given the companies he has led, and from people point of view, and they all have different people culture, by the way. To learn from him and for him to put it together in a book form and give you a playbook, I think it's a great contribution, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, sir. This discussion reminds us that behind every successful startup lies a deliberate investment in people, culture, and leadership. As we conclude this session, I invite Reema Huja ma'am to present a memento to our esteemed speakers as a token of our gratitude. Please give them a big round of applause. Created for BLF 2026 by Padma Shri artist Durga Bai, this artwork symbolizes growth, continuity, and human connection, values central to today's discussion. Raghav sir, please come on the stage. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you to our speakers and to all of you for being part of this session at Vagarth. We hope these conversations continue to shape how we read, reflect, and relate to the world around us. Thank you so much.